Good morning, Thursday morning, Rochester today. I'm Andy Brownell. And of course, Tom Ostrom's with us. Good morning, Tom.
Good morning, Andy.
Happy to see you again. Lots and lots to talk about today. So I guess we'll crank it up right away with the mailbag. What do you have?
Okay. Todd Showalter, a satirical cartoonist, shows Trump saying, we had low gas prices, we had affordable groceries, we had a booming economy, and we had world peace." And Kamala's looking at him and said, "And we're not going back."
Oh, no. I'll wait. Maybe you'll bring it up. I saw one that had me kind of chuckle as well, but go ahead.
No, you might forget. Come on.
Well, it might be one you're already going to mention. It was um, basically a car crashed into a pole, and the car was labeled Minnesota. And our governor was getting out of the car, and another vehicle had stopped along the highway. And of course, it was Kamala Harris. And she said, "Come on, get in, let's go," or something along those lines.
I admire your sense of humor and selectivity, Andrew, and you took my next one by Branko.
I told you.
That's good. Glad you could explain it. From Rose. This was passed on to her from a Facebook friend. Biden is on the verge of starting World War III with Russia. The missiles he's going to send Ukraine require American satellites. This will be viewed as an America First strike on Russia by Putin. He's already said that in an interview. So what's the important issue in this election? Well, it's borders and inflation, but especially this. We don't want our grandkids ending up fighting some war. And at this point, a person would have to be out of their mind to vote for Harris, no matter how much they hated Trump. Probably why so many Democrats, in fact, are switching sides to Trump. They know what's at stake. And then from Joe, he's assessing that dock workers' East Coast strike.
Yeah, we haven't talked about that yet.
No, I thought this would be the opportunity to let Joe handle the topic for us. Tom, one of the current demands of the strikers is to have no automation. Years ago, one of the demands of the West Coast strikers was no computers. They demanded the use of clipboards to continue in lieu of computers to track shipments. These are among the mindless memories of my mind, Thomas. And decades ago, railroad workers struck, forcing railroads to retain firemen aboard trains that were diesel electric. And flight engineers struck when jetliners no longer required flight engineers to tune the bulky engines. But we've had checkout clerks, and they're assisted by scanners. They haven't been replaced. And Amazon exists because of automation. Fear of becoming irrelevant is profound. Yet all of us need to grow and take a step and then another step and go along with some change.
That's well said. We are undergoing what may be a transformation that is more significant than the Industrial Revolution. And a big part of it is automation and artificial intelligence. And we can argue until we're blue in the face about it, but you ain't going to stop it.
No.
And that would be the lesson learned from history. Innovation breeds innovation, breeds innovation. And
that's right.
And any attempts to roadblock it usually ends up poorly. You can look at the example of Caterpillar and some of the automaker unions. I think Caterpillar is UAW, if I remember right. They were able to win some large pay increases because at the time they were negotiating their contracts, the economy was in a very dramatic imbalance due to the pandemic, supply chain problems. And what has ultimately resulted in that is layoffs because these companies are competing internationally and the high wages that they are paying for these manufacturing jobs in the United States are either being replaced by robots or they're being shipped overseas to locations where the pay scales are not as high. And I know that has been a major campaign theme for Trump, and I don't know if there's any way to effectively stop it. I'm not really sure that tariffs are the answer either, but I know he is a great supporter of that idea. But if you look at the longshoremen in California, Joe mentioned that. I had read at a piece what their pay scale is now post their strike back, I want to say in the mid-teens. What was 2015, 2016, somewhere around there? The average pay for a longshoreman in Los Angeles is over $235,000 a year, plus almost $100,000 in additional benefits.
Mm-hmm.
That's astounding. That is more than a beginning medical doctor will earn in family medicine.
That's right, and they get overtime. How that is calculated as part of that.
I think that's included in that $235,000.
It's
hard work. Absolutely,
it's important work. But yeah, they do. I mentioned to Joe, as a conservative, I'm kind of what the historians call a Luddite. A Luddite was a man who blocked some machinery and destroyed it. And I said, I'm kind of a Luddite when it comes to change, but I'm mostly a Luddite against morality change and political change. There with the insistence that all change is good, I don't think always holds true when values are changed and traditional morality is changed on the wave of new innovation ideas that like men and women's sports and things like that. So I think we have to be careful changing morality, cultural philosophy. That I think can be counterproductive.
But I also question whether it can be stopped. Whatever change is going, it's one of those philosophical questions I don't think can be answered because the future hasn't occurred yet. But you're right. There's resisting forces to change, and it's part of the natural flow of history.
Some of the woke philosophies are very destructive, I think.
One more thing regarding the longshoreman strike and the potential impact on the economy heading into the election. It puts Harris and Biden in baseball speak a pickle. Their unabashed support of unionized labor means they likely cannot step in and use the federal government's power to order the workers back to work politically.
Yeah.
But at the same time, they will face enormous political pressures if shortages start showing up in the grocery shelves for some of the produce products that are coming in from overseas because you know what? They're not grown here.
Yeah.
There's not a whole lot of bananas harvested in the United States.
Right. Well, Trump said that with Caterpillar, if they go overseas, he'll do a 200% tariff on whatever products they made that they want to sell back in the U.S. So, and then Trump told...
I know, but Caterpillar at the same time is facing fierce competition from Japanese farm implement makers and even Chinese implement makers.
Yeah. And then this I wasn't even going to mention, but 60 Minutes wants to get... Trump on their show, saying he backed out of an agreement to go on their show. And Trump said back to them, I told you what I need to have myself on your show. You have to apologize for saying the Hunter Biden laptop was Russian disinformation because that cost me the election. The polls showed people, if they had known that, they would have changed their vote. So he says, you do that, and then I might come on your show.
I did not know that. That's interesting.
Yeah.
Okay. That was an extended mailbag.
Yeah.
We'll take a quick break. Back in a moment. Rochester Today, Tom Ostrom. I'm Andy Brownell. Well, it's News Talk 1340, KROC AM and 96.9 FM. It's Rochester Today. Good morning and welcome back. I'm Andy Brownell. Tom Ostrom, of course, here because it is Thursday. Minnesota news, Tom. This is something that popped into my head and I've been exploring in my mind since I was on vacation last week and spending a lot of time on the highway. There was economic statistics that came out. Well, it's been over the past couple months now, maybe 3 months, that show the Rochester area, as far as job growth is concerned, far exceeding the Twin Cities for job growth rate, not only percentage-wise, but in sheer number of jobs. And demographically, that should be impossible. Maybe not the percentage one, but the number one should be impossible because of the sheer number of people that live in the Twin Cities and the number of businesses that are there. We're a relatively small market in comparison. So that suggests to me that the Twin Cities job market is in the crapper. Year over year growth in jobs across the entire Twin Cities. What, 3 million people? 1,000 jobs. That's peanuts.
Mm-hmm.
That number is normally in the tens of thousands as far as job growth is concerned. And normally the Twin Cities by far leads the entire state for job growth by number, not always by percentage. Sometimes that moves around a little bit. But the job growth rate in the Twin Cities year over year last month was 0.1%. That suggests that the Twin Cities is in a recession right now. And it's interesting as we're heading into this presidential election that our governor on the national theater is bragging up Minnesota's economy when these numbers suggest there's a real problem.
Mm-hmm.
Rochester's economy is understandable. You have an incredible capital investment taking place in Rochester, and just the anticipation of that investment by Mayo Clinic is going to drive job growth. You also have the amount of state money that is now flowing into Rochester due to the DMC legislation, which is finally to the point where that state money is very significant annually because the growth in capital investment in Rochester due to Mayo Clinic growth tied to DMC has exceeded anybody's projections and will continue to exceed those projections now for the next 7 to 10 years. So it's no mystery why it's happening here. The question is, why is it so bad in the Twin Cities,
right,
which should be the economic engine for the entire state?
Right. Yeah. And Walz said he didn't know anybody from Yale, those corporate giants that are in the Twin Cities, but they have a lot of executives that went to Yale. But it is, and we'll get to it later, but Walz was spared any questions about Minnesota and Minneapolis by that panel. He wasn't forced to answer about the problems in the Twin Cities. From TJ, KROC News website, a transformational Rochester Park improvement project received massive funding boosts going along with economic growth. The city of Rochester received more than $1.5 million from the Outdoor Recreation Legacy Partnership, and it's through the National Park Service. And the award covers about half the cost of the $3 million project. And the grant was awarded, I guess it involves Reverend Martin Luther King Jr. Park along East Center Street, and multiple improvements and additions to the park are on the list. Resurfacing courts, sports courts, installation of playground equipment, a picnic shelter, community garden, new restroom, basketball courts, dropping electrical connections in the plaza area or putting them up, I think that means, where food trucks can park, and Wi-Fi services. And city officials say a project timeline and input and feedback from the community is coming.
All right. That's the park, if people aren't aware, that's right out by the federal prison and across from Olmsted Medical Hospital.
And then this from Aaron Galloway on the KROC staff, Town Square Media, and it was on the Rochester News website. uh, from Galloway after 2 weekends of heightened violence in downtown Minneapolis. Again, that wasn't covered in the debate. The Minneapolis Police Department implemented a safety initiative that should curb the violence, according to the MPD release. The plan targets curfew violators in certain locations, and Police Chief O'Hara acknowledged recent events and crime and violence, underscored the need to address groups of juveniles that engage in street confrontations, and there were tragic outcomes in the previous weeks, and so a curfew task force was formed called the Downtown Late Night Safety Plan, and that's been evolving over some time, and it was partnerships and is partnerships with other law enforcement agencies, the Metro Transit Police, the Hennepin County Sheriff, the Minnesota State Patrol, and community groups like Mother's Love, We Push for Peace, and it's rather significant and sensible development for downtown Minneapolis.
It should be noted that last weekend was the first weekend we did not report a major spasm of violence in downtown Minneapolis. And when this horrible tragedy occurred 2 or 3 weekends ago, when the woman drove into the crowd of people outside the bar off Hennepin Avenue, and the victim was a 16-year-old girl. According to police, was also involved in the altercation that preceded the woman crashing the car into the group. The first thing that popped in my mind was, what was a 16-year-old kid doing down by Hennepin Avenue at like 1:30 in the morning or whatever it was, in the middle of the night? And obviously this is a reaction to that question, because I'm sure a lot of people were asking that.
Mm-hmm. We got time for another?
We do.
Minneapolis swears in the first non-U.S. citizen as a police officer. And she's a native of Somalia, and she was... Pardon?
I thought she was from Mexico.
Well, this is Breitbart. Said she's a native of Somalia, but her name sounds Hispanic, but I'm reading directly.
There was a woman of Somali descent that was also sworn in. I wonder if they got confused.
Wow. Well, that'd be fine if the Somali woman was citizen, but whoever they swore in is not a citizen. And they say Vera was seen at the swearing-in ceremony wearing a hijab, the scarf over her head, and she moved to Minneapolis. Now they say this, from her arrival point in Mexico when she was 4, and she is a legal resident alien, though.
A permanent resident.
But not a citizen, but she's authorized to work in America. The green card, I guess. And Minneapolis Police Chief Brian O'Hara defended the idea of it, and then he said our new officers include the first Somali American woman to join the force, and a police service has to look like our residents to serve our residents. And Minneapolis Mayor Jacob Frey agreed with all that. And it said the door was open for the woman when the Minnesota Peace Officers Standard, the Minnesota Board of Peace Officers, adopted this new rule that allows enforcement agencies to elevate non-citizens to the role. The citizenship requirement was dropped, and applicants now only need to be a legal resident, and other states have done this too. California, Colorado, and Illinois are crafting similar legislation. That bothers me. I don't think it's a good precedent, but I have to say I'm contradicting myself on the principle, because non-citizens are accepted into the Army, and then when they've served their time, they're granted citizenship, and I'm okay with that. So I don't know why I'm not okay with this.
Okay. I say I have no issues with it. A permanent non-resident status is, I think, plenty good. If you
Yeah.
meet all the other requirements, and you pointed out the main rationale, I agree with it, is it's been long tradition of people holding that status being able to enlist in the military.
But I don't know if there's a legal issue there of a non-citizen arresting a citizen, and
I don't.
I don't know why they can't say, well, go get your citizenship and we'll welcome you. I don't know why that's so tough.
I think part of this, excuse me, part of this is driven by these law enforcement agencies, and particularly the Minneapolis Police Department, facing such a shortage of personnel. And this is a way to meet that shortage, is to widen the applicant pool. And I guess I'm saying roundabout way, I had no issue with it. I don't understand the controversy. So we have to take our break for news for a little overtime. We have a debate to talk about and a bunch of other things as well, including big developments in foreign affairs. That's all coming up on Rochester Today with Tom Ostrom. I'm Andy Brownell, and this is News Talk 1340, KROC AM and 96.9 FM. Good morning. Welcome back. Rochester Today. Tom Ostrom and Andy Brownell. Tom, national news. What should we start with?
Well, I'm going to be quickly mentioning that immigrants are arrested in the flood zones of the Southwest after the hurricane for looting. Lots of illegal immigrants have evidently taken advantage of that, and they've been arrested. Looting is a serious crime, and the National Guard and police go after them. And then I'm going to say that horrible flooding in North Carolina, that didn't come up much in the debate either, if at all. Over 1,000 people are unaccounted for in North Carolina, and that means many possibilities. So for some reason, that wasn't touched on in the debate either.
I just pray that those people are found and that they're okay.
There's over 100, I guess, that they know are
I think it's even higher now, more than 150 confirmed.
But that's so serious, and that wasn't really talked about in the debate either yesterday. And we'll get to the debate. In fact, we'll get there now.
Okay. Full disclosure, Tom, I didn't see it.
Good.
I was busy doing other things.
Then you can't find fault with my interpretation.
Okay, I read a lot though.
Well,
I tried to read every response and every description I could find. So I'm going to let you, since you watched it, you go first.
Okay. I watched it. Walz started off weakly, in a weak manner, with his eyes bugging out, and he looked very, very nervous. He struggled on the big stage. He had a biased panel. The two women said they wouldn't fact check, but they fact checked Vance, and then Vance told them their fact check was wrong. But they tried to defend Walz, and Vance did have to deal with three people then instead of just Walz. And Vance just made Walz nervous. For example, the fact check was that the abortion issue in Minnesota and what doctors are allowed to do or not do at the late stages. But Walz looked nervous under pressure, and the moderators did ask him. He said he was in China during Tiananmen Square disaster when he wasn't, and why did he say that? He didn't even try to answer that one. He just said, I talk too much and I'm a knucklehead.
Yeah, to me, that response is inexplicable.
Yeah. And then he had a verbal slip. He said, I've become friends with school shooters. However that came out of his mouth when he said it. But
nerves.
But then Vance just touted Trump's peace through diplomacy and peace through strength. And then they went after him and said, the ladies on the panel said, you were vehemently anti-Trump, and they quoted nasty things Vance said about Trump. And she said, if you had those feelings, how could you have changed your mind? And Vance looked right at him and he said, you know why I had those feelings? Because I believed your media reports and what you were saying about them that are false. And but Vance was calm, cool, pleasant, congenial. He even said some kind things about Waltz, and then Waltz was forced to try to think of something back, and he did. And Donald Trump was asked what he thought, and he said the ladies were extremely biased anchors, and they didn't fact check Tim, and then they got on JD, the panel, and Waltz. When JD said we have to deport these, especially criminal illegals, and that will raise American wages, and that will lower housing costs. And boy, they went after him for that, but he had some stats that he pulled that seemed to indicate there'd be something to that. But he said migration is pushing up housing costs, and Vance said crowding schools, filling hospitals, increasing crime, and then Waltz touted his Taylor Swift endorsement, but that has cost her some supporters, I guess. She has some kind of an organization that has lost members.
And I will never understand why that would influence. I don't care who it is. If it's any Hollywood star or any musician, why would I take your advice?
Yeah.
For a decision like that. I mean, but that's within their purview to go ahead and endorse somebody. That's for sure.
Mm-hmm. And then Waltz said that Trump is a threat to democracy, and Vance was cool and congenial and pleasant and eloquent and articulate, and Waltz stumbled a lot, like I just did. And he said that immigration is causing these things, and it has to be stopped. The crime, the child trafficking, he said, that is outrageous, and he listed a lot of things. Fox News, Brit Hume, found the moderators were obnoxious, that he wasn't impressed with them at all. And then ABC comments after the debate, and one ABC panel member said Waltz's performance is like Biden's performance, and he was destroyed by Vance. And then Vance made the argument that tariffs protect American jobs and wages, and Waltz got on him for that. And Vance reminded him that Trump's tariffs are still in effect in the Biden administration.
Well, that's a fact. There we go. Yeah. Fact checked.
Yeah. And then the panel said that Vance was wrong about what he said about Minnesota's abortion under Waltz. And I guess the fact check is that Waltz signed the bill allowing abortion through pregnancy. That's a controversy yet that people argue both sides of.
Yep, it depends on which way you want to view it, I think.
And then when Waltz said that I said I was in Hong Kong during Tiananmen Square, but I wasn't, and he said I'm just a knucklehead sometime. And then Vance really went after this, and he was called racist for being so anti-immigrant, and he said, well, are you pro-children? Children are being used as drug trafficking mules, and they're involved in sex trafficking. No excuse for that. And then Vance said how China controls the solar panel supply chain and minerals there, and so Waltz, evidently, even by Democrats on the left-wing shows, didn't come off as strongly as he needed to be.
I think from a person who didn't see it and has read about it, I think probably the most harmful thing he did to himself was the knucklehead comment. I get it. It's a little bit disarming. Oh, yeah, look at me. I make mistakes. I'm a knucklehead. But you're running for vice president of the United States, a heartbeat away from the presidency. Your responsibility, if you were to have to assume that role, is immense. And I do just to throw that around so casually that, yeah, it's okay. I like to talk a lot. I'm a knucklehead. Yeah, I don't think that resonates really well. My other take from this, well, first of all, the polling numbers afterwards, from what I've read, is it didn't move the needle much, right? It did improve favorability for both candidates, ironically. Probably the biggest gains for Vance. Still, he's underwater for favorability, but his numbers are greatly improved compared to where they were a few weeks ago. People are now entrenched. The vast majority of voters are entrenched in their views on this race, either for Harris or for Trump. So where the needle may have moved a little bit is among those independent undecideds, and I think Vance, according to what I've read in the polls, probably helped out Trump a little bit with those independents. How much, I couldn't tell you, but I will, anything else, Tom, before we take a break?
Well, one liberal said he was warm, he was human, plain spoken, Mr. Vance, and I think his weakest response was trying to defend the January 6th riots, and not really conceding that Biden won a fair election. He got into that realm, and that was a little tougher in that sense. But another panelist on the liberal network said Vance was laid back, confident, friendly. He wasn't nasty. He even complimented Walz, and Walz got in that he was happy that Dick Cheney endorsed him and Taylor Swift endorsed him, but people thought Walz was nervous, and I attribute that, and so do others, to the fact that Vance has had hundreds of interviews with hostile media, and Harris and Walz have avoided the media, so Walz wasn't used to even having aggressive comments his way. If the moderators didn't really rough him up, Vance did.
So I think where Vance, from what I've read, was most successful was his ability to turn the arguments around and connect Harris to the Biden administration by continually calling it the Harris administration and pointing out that all of these proposals that she is making now, where were they for the last 3.5 years? And reminding the people watching the show that she is part of an administration that has been in the White House for the 3.5 years and should be tied to these economic issues and other problems faced by the country that have yet to be addressed while Biden and Harris have been in power. Quick, one more thing before we take a break. The one thing I'm really kind of weary of is this whole concept of fact checking, the way it is being done, because it is trying to take very complex issues that are multifaceted and breaking them down into yes or no, or black and white. You're wrong, they're right, or vice versa. In particular, this abortion question in the state of Minnesota is full of gray areas. And it's not anywhere near as simple as you're wrong, as Walz says, and Vance contending that he's right on this question. The law was changed. The law used to specifically direct physicians that they had to attempt life-saving measures if a child survived an abortion. That language has been removed and replaced with a requirement to care for the child. So the real question is, what is the definition of care in that situation? Is it palliative care? Is it comfort care? Or is it life-saving care? And those who are in support of that legislative change argue that that leaves it up to the doctor and the patient to decide, as it always has been in similar circumstances. And those on the other side of the coin will say, well, there really aren't any similar circumstances because in this case, the procedure itself was designed to kill the baby.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And in other cases of medical intervention, that is certainly not the case.
Right. But I think Vance's mistake was the moderators did not bring up any of Walz's Minnesota governing problems, and Vance didn't have the opportunity to twist it around and get it covered and confront Walz about it. That was the only mistake I thought Vance made. Other than that, he was commanding and congenial.
Okay, we do have to take a break. We have to talk about what happened in the Middle East. Back in a moment. Rochester Today, News Talk 1340, KROC AM at 96.9 FM.
Most tax pros leave a message.
It's Jane. I'm moving on to a TurboTax expert who beat your price. Adam Devine, tell him how I feel.
Hey, tax pro, she's been thinking twice. Best believe TurboTax will beat your price. This is a tax break.
Switch to a TurboTax Live expert and we'll beat what you paid your pro last tax season. Make the switch at TurboTax.com/beatyourprice. TurboTax full service only. Sign up by 12/20/2024 and file by 4/1/2025. Full details at TurboTax.com/beatyourprice.
We're back. Rochester Today. A few minutes left in the program with Tom Ostrom. I'm Andy Brownell. And, of course, on the foreign affairs front, the events this week in the Middle East are dominating everything. Israel attacked directly again by the Iranians. A massive inflow of ballistic missiles, close to 200 of them. Thankfully, due to very innovative technology by the Israelis and the United States and allies, a majority of them were shot down, and reports indicate the damage was relatively minor due to this attack. This leaves it now back to what will the Israelis do in response? How forceful will be the response? Will that response trigger a wider war in the Middle East? Is a wider war inevitable in the Middle East, considering what is happening with Iran's proxies of Hamas and Hezbollah and their mission to destroy Israel, which is also the Iranian issue? Scary times in that part of the world, and the United States is directly involved.
I just can't believe how Iran keeps poking the bear, and why any nation or group in the Middle East dares hit Israel. They know what's going to happen to them. Israel is taking out their commanders on all sides. And I think this was the first time that Iran directly sent missiles into Israel, and they didn't do much damage. Whether Iran could control the missiles enough to send them in so they wouldn't, so Israel would limit its response, or just Israel was fortunate. But the defense systems Israel has that the U.S. gave them, and by the way, some U.S. Navy vessels helped down those Iranian missiles too, were very, very effective. And Israel, very busy with the war fronts, said, we will respond at the time of our choosing, and Iran will suffer greatly for it. They haven't learned a lesson. I'll credit Washington, I'll credit Biden, I'll credit Harris. They were very, very firm on that this is outrageous, and we support Israel with our weaponry and with our philosophies, and we stand by Israel. They were so outspoken by it, and I guess Biden wants to talk with Israel about it, but they were so commanding in their support that I thought, boy, they're going to lose some Michigan Arab voters, because they really came out on Israel's side. And Netanyahu said they made a big mistake. They're going to pay for it. And Israel vows vengeance, and had minimal casualties. One of the casualties was a Palestinian. Shrapnel from a missile fell on him and crushed him. But the Israelis say we will respond at our time and choosing. And those Iron Dome things are really something. The radar scans the skies. They calculate the threat. The technology does. and the dome locks into anything headed for a populated area. I did some reading about the details of it, and a missile is fired from an Iron Dome launcher to intercept, and then the interceptor destroys the incoming rocket, and Prime Minister Netanyahu confirmed that Israel will respond with its own retaliatory attack, and he said this, and we will hit the Islamic Republic's oil production and nuclear facilities.
In other words, wait and see. The world has become a very dangerous place over the last several years. We'll have to talk more about that next week, considering what developments occur, Tom. But we are out of time. So you have a great weekend, and we'll talk to you Tuesday.
Okay. Thanks.
All right. Mike Doherty from the Minnesota Department of Transportation with us tomorrow on Rochester Today. News Talk 1340, KROC AM and 96.9 FM.
Most tax pros leave a message.
It's Jane. I'm moving on to a TurboTax expert who beat your price. Adam Devine, tell him how I feel.
Hey, tax pro, she's been thinking twice. Best believe TurboTax will beat your price. This is a tax break.
Switch to a TurboTax Live expert and we'll beat what you paid your pro last tax season. Make the switch at TurboTax.com/beatyourprice. TurboTax full service only. Sign up by 12/20/2024 and file by 4/1/2025. Full details at TurboTax.com/beatyourprice.